Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. So today we would like to presenting our group material, sampling technique used in research methodology. I'm Julia Eka Putri Zarina with student number A1B223082.
And my name is Astara Priani Rumapea with student ID A1B223034.
And me, Inggit Aulia Aisyah, with student number A1B226044.
So our first material will be presented by Esther.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, we go to the introduction to sampling. So on this slide, we will talk about the basic of sampling. Sampling simply means selecting a smaller groups from a larger population to represent the whole. For example, like instead of studying every single students in a university, we can take just a few students as a sample to represent them. So why do we need sampling? Mainly because it saves time and money, it's more practical, and if done correctly, the sample can give us results that represent the population quite well. Next slide, please. Okay, now we move on to probability sampling. Probability sampling means that every single member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. This makes it more representative and reduce bias. There are four main types. The first is simple random sampling. This is where everyone has the same chance, just like drawing names from a hat, drawing the students' names randomly. The second is systematic sampling. It is selecting based on a fixed interval. So it is like we pick people at regular intervals. For example, every 10th person on a list. Then the third is stratified sampling. This is where the population is divided into groups, such as by gender or age. And then we take random samples from each group. And the lastly is cluster sampling. It is where the population divided into cluster, like schools or villages. And then we randomly select whole clusters to study. So the key point here is that probability sampling is best for large scale research when we want accurate and representative results. I think that's all from me. We go to the next.
Alright, so today I would like to explain non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling is a method where not every member of the population has a chance to be selected. Instead, the researcher chooses participants based on convenience, judgment, or referrals. It is often used in qualitative research, exploratory studies, or when it's hard to reach the whole population. And there are four main types: is convenience sampling, purposive sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. Convenience sampling, respondents are chosen because they are easiest to reach. A teacher surveys only her own students. This method is quick and practical, but not representative. For example, a teacher surveys only her own students about study habits. Purposive sampling. The researcher deliberated chooses participants who are most relevant or knowledgeable. For example, interviewing only cancer survivors for a health study. Next is quota sampling. The researcher sets a fixed number, for subgroups. For example, survey 50 men, 50 men and 50 women about a new product. Next is snowball sampling. The first participants recruit others who meet the criteria. It's useful for hidden populations, like undocumented immigrants or drug users. Next, please. All right. Next is comparison. Probability versus non-probability sampling. Representativeness. Probability sampling high representativeness because every member of the population has an equal chance or being selected. Suitable when the goal is to generalize the findings to the whole population. Non-probability sampling has low representativeness because samples are chosen by convenience or judgment, so they cannot fully represent the population. Next is bias. Probability sampling has lower bias since participants are chosen randomly and sampling error can be measured. And for non-probability sampling has higher bias because it is based on convenience or judgment, which makes results less reliable for generalization. Next is purpose of use. Probability sampling is used when the goal is generalization, like in national surveys or public opinion polls. And for non-probability sampling is usually used for exploration, understanding, or preliminary studies, especially in qualitative research. Next, please. Okay, for the example comparison, probability versus non-probability sampling. Probability sampling has, for example, is like for simple random sampling. Example, randomly selecting 100 students from a list of 1,000 using a lottery system. Next is systematic sampling. From a list of 100 employees, survey every 20%. Stratified sampling. A university surveys 50 students from each faculty to ensure balanced representation. And for the cluster sampling, to survey high school students in a city. Researchers randomly choose 5 schools and survey all students in those schools. And for non-probability sampling, convenience sampling. A researcher surveys friends in their class because they are easiest to reach. And for purposive sampling, interviewing only teachers with more than 10 years of experience to study teaching strategies. And for quota sampling, a survey requires 60 men and 40 women. The researcher collects responses until both quotas are complete. And for the last, snowball sampling. Research on a hidden community, for example, drug users, where one participant introduced the researchers to others. Okay, that's all from me. And the next slide will be explained by Julia.
Okay, we came to the factors to consider in choosing a sampling technique. So, the first thing to think about is what the study is trying to achieve. If the aim is to describe or generalize findings to a larger group, probability sampling is usually necessary. But if the aim is only to explore opinions, behaviors, or trends in a smaller scope, non-probability sampling might be enough. For example, If a government wants to know the average income of citizens across the whole country, they need probability sampling to make sure all groups are fairly represented. But if a student just wants to understand what their classmates think about online learning, then non-probability sampling is acceptable. So the second one is characteristic of the population. So the population can be large, small, homogeneous, like similar, or heterogeneous, diverse. If the population is very diverse, researchers must make sure that all subgroups are included, which often requires probability sampling. And if the population is relatively similar, simpler techniques may be sufficient. For example, in a university, students may come from different faculties, years, and background. To avoid over-representing one group, only engineering students, for example, probability sampling can be used to select students from each faculty proportionally. And, and then time and cost availability. So some sampling techniques are practical but expensive, while others are cheap but less reliable. So researchers must balance the available budget and deadlines with the need for accurate data. For example, conducting a national survey with random sampling requires travel, staff, and logistic, which can be very costly. And on the other hand, using convenience sampling, such as interviewing people in a nearby mall, is cheaper and faster, but the result might not represent the entire population. The next is expected level of accuracy. So some studies require very precise and reliable data, while others allow more flexibility the higher the accuracy required. The more rigorous the sampling technique should be. For example, in medical research, accuracy is critical because the result can affect people's health and safety. And that's why researchers use systematic random sampling or stratified sampling. But in market research, for example, testing if people like a new soda flavor, companies sometimes use convenience sampling because they mainly want quick feedback. Okay, the next is advantages and limitation probability sampling. So for the advantages, ensure every individual in the population has an equal chance to be selected, reducing bias. Produce more representative samples so the results can be generalized to the whole population and enable researchers to use statistical analysis to measure the reliability of their results. For example, if 1,000 students are randomly selected from a university with 20,000 students, the sample is more likely to reflect the true opinions of the whole university. And the limitation, for example, requires a complete list of the entire population, which is not always available, time consuming because of the careful produce needed, and can be costly due to larger sample size and logistic. For example, to conduct random sampling in a city, researchers would need access to an updated list of all residents, which is often hard to obtain. And then for non-probability sampling, the advantages is easy and quick to conduct, making it practical when time and money are limited, useful for exploratory research, pilot studies, or when researchers just need preliminary insight. Doesn't require a full list of the population. For example, a psychology student interviewing 20 friends about stress during exams can get useful insight without spending much time or money. And for the limitation, first, we have high rates of bias since not everyone has the same chance of being selected, and the result cannot always be generalized to the larger populations. And then the accuracy of is usually lower compared to probability sampling. And for another example, if company only ask its employees whether they like the company's product, the feedback may not reflect the opinion of customers outside the company. So the conclusion is, first, choosing the right sampling technique is not a one-size-fits-all decision. Researchers must carefully consider their research goals, the nature of the population, available resources, and the required accuracy. And then probability sampling is more reliable and accurate, but often requires more time, money, and effort. Non-probability sampling is simpler and cheaper, but comes with risk of bias and limited generalization. The third one is the most important point is that the sampling technique should match the research objective. Good sampling leads to valid, trustworthy, and meaningful results. For example, for a large-scale national health survey, probability sampling is the only reasonable choice, but for a small classroom project, non-probability sampling might be enough and much more practical. So I think that's all the material from our group presentations today. Thank you for thank you for the opportunities for this presentation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, guys, thank you.